Coming in Facebook, coming in YouTube. Oh, it looks like Facebook messed up on me today. Usually it's you guys that mess up when I come on. So hang on a second. Let's see if we can get this bad boy going. Got an error message on my YouTube feed today. So let's try to add it back in. Thank you for being here, YouTube. I missed you guys yesterday. This phone actually got damaged and was getting worked on yesterday as I was doing the show. All right, let's see if we can get Facebook. Something went wrong, it says. Now that's really weird. So come on in, Facebook. I don't know what's going on with, YouTube. I don't know what's going on with Facebook today, but for some reason, hey Shirley, some reason it's not letting me into Facebook today. I don't know why. My snake bit with all these social media places yesterday. Like I was saying yesterday, this phone here that I use to do the feed for you guys here on YouTube, actually the phone went completely white on the screen when I woke up in the morning, and so I had to go get it fixed. So it was getting fixed. Hello YouTube, come on in you guys. I have tried to get on for the past 3 or 4 minutes and it kept kicking me out as I was pushing the live button. So looks like you are here. Gonna let a few of you guys come on in. We're about T-minus 2 minutes away from starting my show Jimmy Rants over on Instagram Live. And I got a really interesting article, which is a study actually here for you today. Glad your phone got fixed, says Shirley. Yes, that phone is my iPhone 10. And for some reason, the whole screen went white. And so I took it up to the shop and I had just recently gotten the screen replaced on this phone for another problem where it gave me issues. And so I took it in yesterday thinking, oh boy, what's this gonna cost me? And they're like, oh, you were just here like 10 days ago. I said, yeah. He's like, oh, we have a 90-day warranty. If anything happens to your screen, we'll fix it for free. So I got the fix for free. It looks like a brand new phone now. So I asked him if there was anything wrong that I did wrong. He said, no, just this stuff happens from time to time. So anyway, I was happy he got it fixed. Hello, Norma. Hello, Tracy. Hello, Nancy. We're getting ready to start my show, Jimmy Rants, over on Instagram. So as always, guys, get ready. Go ahead and share it with all your followers. You can share it on your personal page. You can share it on any group page that you're a part of. But share. And if you have someone that has type 2 diabetes or has insulin resistance, this is a brand new study that's going to be relevant to them, of information you probably haven't heard about before. So I'm really excited to share this one with you guys here today. Hello, Sharon. Thank you for being here today. All right, we're gonna get this show on the road over on Instagram, and here we go. Are we missing the element between trace minerals and blah? I did it again. I'm gonna end it this time. I'm gonna start over. I messed that one up way too bad. Let's do that again. I'm gonna start it all over because I don't like messing up that much. Like, I don't mind messing up a little, but that was really bad. See, I am very human, guys. Got a lot on my mind right now. I swear I'm gonna nail it this time. You watch, I'm gonna nail it this time. I'm gonna nail it. All right, here we go. They're gonna be like, wait, I thought you were wait, you're not where'd you go? All right, let's try that again. Is the role of minerals and trace elements in type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance being underserved? Find out here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. Click on that little box down there in the corner. It'll take you straight to IGTV for today's episode. All right, so yes, you can watch me here, right here on Instagram. I am at Livin' Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. What's up, Temple? Once you're there, engage live, just like Temple and Steph and Cindy and all the wonderful peoples coming in. Jennifer, all coming in right now here today on Jimmy Rants. We do go live at 11 a.m. Eastern time, Monday through Friday, so be there, be square. We also simulcast live over here on my Facebook page as well as on my YouTube channel. So thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay right here on Instagram. All the past episodes go up on IGTV, so you can watch it there. Shortly after the show is over, it goes right up to the show, posts on my main page. I put a few notes and then you can watch it in totality. You can also watch the replay over on YouTube. Just type in the keyword Jimmy Rants. You will find the show. And we also have an official website for this show, jimmyrants.com. Once you're there, you can see all the past episodes there. And if you like what I do here and like the studies and the information that I share here on a daily basis during the week, click on that Patreon link. And we have recently really stepped up our game when it comes to Patreon. So if you support my work, not only am I giving you all these Jimmy Rants for free, I also am giving you some exclusive content there at Patreon. Most notably, you get access to the 2 interviews for the next week. So my web guy right now is working on getting next week's Livin' La Vida Low Carb show on Wednesday and Real Talk podcast on Thursday. They're video interviews. He's getting those videos ready to be posted to the Patreon link, so you get early access to those. I also interact with you there. What do you want me to talk about? I'm working on doing some exclusive Jimmy Rants just for my Patreons. And I'm going to let you be some editorial content in telling me how you want me to do this show out here for everyone. So definitely, if you love what I do, please go support me. Click on the Patreon link at jimmyrants.com. Okay, you guys, I have a really fascinating Jimmy Rants for you here today, because the subject of type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance is all the rage right now, especially with what's going on with the coronavirus and how the people who are most susceptible to this are the ones who have the worst metabolic damage, and the things called comorbidities, which type 2 diabetes would be one of those. And they're looking at ways that you can control your insulin levels, lower your blood sugar levels. I've been doing quite a few Jimmy Rants lately on that subject. Well, when we start talking about this subject, what is the first thing people go to? They go to macronutrients. So are you eating less carbohydrate? Are you eating more fat? And those kinds of things. You know, what's the impact of protein on diabetes? Can you get a glucose response from the protein that would impact your diabetes? On and on and on. And usually that's where the discussion stops when it comes to nutrition. But what about other factors in your nutrition that could be impacting type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance? What about micronutrients? I think macro has been the big boy on the block for so long that we forget there are lots of micronutrients that are involved in the process of blood sugar regulation and insulin sensitivity. We just don't know about those things. And so I found a study, you guys, that just got published. I'm trying to see when it got published. It looks like, June, it got published, June of 2020, June 12th. And it's in the journal called Nutrients, okay? The title of the study, The Role of Minerals and Trace Elements in Diabetes and Insulin Resistance. And it's from a variety of researchers across all these fields of gynecology, translational and molecular medicine, biomedical sciences. These are the people that wrote this paper, and they wanted to see what are those minerals and trace elements that are essential to the human body, so that people can see that they have an impact on their diabetes as well. Have you ever even thought about this before? Like, unless it's been put on your radar screen that you're deficient in some kind of mineral or trace element, would you even know about it? You probably wouldn't. If you go to see a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, they will be looking for mineral and trace elements very quickly. And that's one of the beautiful things that FNTPs do quite well, is they can do a functional exam where they press on different parts of your body and they can tell what you are deficient in based on a pain level that you respond with. It's pretty fascinating. If you've never seen a nutritional therapist before, and gotten this done. But this is huge, guys. Like, I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about minerals and trace elements as it relates to insulin resistance, and obviously the worst form of insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. And if you're just joining us, this is a brand new study that just came out last month, June of 2020. It's in the journal Nutrients, and the title of it, Role of Minerals and Trace Elements in Diabetes and Insulin Resistance. So let's get into this study. All right, so minerals and trace elements are micronutrients that are essential to the human body. Let me remind you what essential means. Essential doesn't mean it's a good idea. Essential means if you don't get it, you will die. This is why we have essential fatty acids, essential amino acids, the proteins. We don't have essential carbohydrate acids, as I have noted before, but you do have essential minerals and vitamins and trace elements that are all a part of your diet generally. Nonetheless, they exhibit well-defined biochemical functions. Deficiencies in these micronutrients are related to widespread human health problems. The problem is most people aren't being taught about the micronutrients. Most people aren't even having it on their radar screen that they need to be getting things. Now, occasionally they'll hear something about vitamin D and making sure you get fortified milk that has it in it, or vitamin C, and they drink their orange juice thinking that's the only way they get vitamin C. Occasionally they know things about that. But some of the things we're going to talk about in this paper, most people haven't got a clue. Now, if you want to learn more about micronutrients and minerals and trace elements, we do a pretty thorough job in the book Real Food Keto. So if you've not picked up a copy of this book, it's very, very detailed at all of the vitamins, minerals, and trace elements that are essential to your health in case you want to learn more. So this review article is focused on some of these minerals and trace element deficiencies and their consequences in diabetes and insulin resistance. The level of trace elements vary considerably among different populations, contingent on the composition of the diet, because again, this is where you get a lot of your trace minerals is from your diet. In several Asian countries, large proportions of the population are affected by a number of micronutrient deficiencies. Local differences in things like selenium, zinc, copper, iron, chromium, and iodine in the diet occur in both developed and developing countries, largely due to malnutrition and the dependence on indigenous nutrition. So in these other countries, they are deficient because they're not eating enough of anything. And so they're under eating calories and thus under eating the appropriate levels of these micronutrients for health. These overall deficiencies, and in a few cases, excess of essential trace elements, may lead to an imbalance in glucose homeostasis, meaning it's trying to stay within a range that's homeostasis. And so glucose goes out of control when these trace elements are not in the diet, as well as those who have insulin resistance. The most extensive problems affecting 1 billion people or more worldwide are all associated with an inadequate supply of a number of minerals and trace elements. They include iodine, selenium, zinc, calcium, chromium, cobalt, iron, boron, and magnesium. This review comprises various randomized controlled trials, cohort and case studies, case control studies, and observational and laboratory-based studies with substantial outcomes of micronutrient deficiencies as it relates to diabetes and insulin resistance. They looked at people from Asia, Africa, and North America. Changes in these micronutrient levels in the blood and urine of subjects may indicate the trajectory towards metabolic changes, oxidative stress, and disease-relevant information. Okay, so minerals and trace elements are essential micronutrients required for the normal functioning of the body. These elements are particularly beneficial for physiological functions. Minerals and trace elements are essential for many of the biochemical reactions that happen in the body, present as stabilizing components of enzymes and proteins, and they function as cofactors for many enzymes. So all of these things that go on in the body, they have a requirement not just for fat, protein, and all the things that we look at with the macronutrients, but it has a requirement with lots of micronutrients. This is why I get so upset when I hear people talk about meat, the vegans especially, talk about meat and they just say, oh, it's just a blob of protein. And I'm going, okay, if you look at red meat and you think all that's in there is a blob of protein, you are doing a great disservice to people and their understanding of the great nutrition that is found in red meat, for example. And there's lots of micronutrients in there, especially if it comes from a grass-fed animal, especially if that is an animal-based product that's more on the offal side. Things like liver and heart and kidney and brain, those are all highly, highly chock full of these micronutrients that we're talking about in this paper here today. And so we need to understand that they are important, getting these things in there, just as important as the macronutrients. Certain trace elements regulate crucial biological processes by binding to the receptor site of the cell membrane, or by changing the shape of the receptor to prevent entry of particular molecules into the cell. Micronutrients serve a dual role. They maintain the stabilization of the cellular structure at their optimal levels, but their inadequacy, which is what most people deal with, proceeds to alternate pathways and may cause ailments. Here's the thing, the body is very intelligent. We don't give the body enough credit for its adaptability. If you don't feed your body enough of a certain micronutrient, or macro for that matter, macronutrient, if you don't feed your body enough of something that it needs, guess what it does? It compensates by grabbing it from another part of your body. Sometimes it takes some other element in your body, puts it through a process to get what it needs of the thing that you're not feeding it, but then you're deficient in the other one, and this is where people get into trouble. They never stay adequate on all of these things. These essential micronutrients have such important physiological implications and exhibit direct associations with things like type 2 diabetes. Scientific evidence and clinical data from diabetes research are reliable sources for essential micronutrient deficiencies and overloads. However, the many inconsistent studies make it difficult for a doctor to establish nutritional recommendations for their patients with diabetes. Due to progress in interventions and research, the life expectancy of diabetes subjects has risen with an overall increase in the geriatric population. Trace element associated antioxidant enzymes are altered when you have diabetes. Many cohort studies have shown that homeostasis of trace elements can be altered specifically with someone who has diabetes. So they're laying the groundwork, guys, that when you have diabetes especially, or when you have insulin resistance, which means you're kind of headed in the direction of type 2 diabetes because your insulin isn't responding to glucose the way it's supposed to, the key here is adequate levels of trace elements and minerals is going to rightly balance that glucose again, so the body doesn't have to work as hard. Early imbalances in specific elements may play an important role in disrupting insulin metabolism. In other words, shifting you from insulin sensitivity over to insulin resistance. The majority of cohort studies focus either on a single element or a limited combination of elements. Micronutrients are identified as vital nutrients that are required in trace amounts for homeostasis, enzyme regulation, and functioning. Macro elements, vitamins, trace elements, and organic acids are the four major classifications of micronutrients. Macro elements primarily include chloride, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, sodium, potassium, and iron, whereas the trace elements are things like cobalt, boron, chromium, copper, sulfur, iodine, zinc, and molybdenum. They all enhance insulin action by activating the receptor sites of insulin receptor sites. These trace elements play specific roles in the pathogenesis and the progression of type 2 diabetes. Like, did you even know that before now? Like, I think in looking at type 2 diabetes and looking at insulin resistance, we rightfully so look very heavily at the thing that is increasing blood sugar and blood insulin levels the most. And that's the carbohydrate that you eat. And so that's an obvious first place to be looking at all this when it comes to those diseases. But the problem is, if you're only looking at that and you're not paying attention much to the micronutrients and you're not realizing that they play a profound impact in the insulin pathway and how it helps to control your blood sugar, then you might be missing out. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've been keto for a little while and you're still seeing way out of control blood sugar. Maybe your insulin isn't coming down quite like you wanted it to, and it's having other effects on your health. Maybe look at your micronutrients. We're going to go over the specific ones that people are very typically deficient in and see if you can shore these up either through food or supplementation. I think it could really help a lot of people. This review includes various randomized trials, cohort, and case-controlled studies. This comprehensive review gathers studies across the planet, across all racial inhabitants. Overall, this review validates that trace element deficiencies may directly or indirectly be associated with oxidative stress, which you don't want oxidative stress, that ultimately proceeds to insulin resistance and then type 2 diabetes. Okay, so let's look at the first one. Boron. Anybody know where boron comes from or what boron does in the body? This is an important but often underused trace micronutrient found in certain foods. It plays a diverse and significantly important role in your metabolism. The most relevant properties of boron in relation to human health include bone development and regeneration, wound healing, sex hormone production, vitamin D metabolism, and the absorption and use of calcium and magnesium. So all of those things require boron to be at adequate levels. And so when boron is not at adequate levels, look at all the parts of your health that start to suffer, and the body has to start compensating because you didn't feed yourself enough boron. Studies have shown that dietary boron modulates your insulin concentration. It showed in one study that rats deprived of boron had a significantly higher blood level of insulin than rats supplemented with boron. So perhaps you have a higher insulin level and you're keto to the hilt. You don't eat any carbs whatsoever, hardly in your diet, and you're still having elevated levels of fasting insulin. I wonder what would happen if you added in some boron. Pretty amazing, right? Boron deficiency demonstrated no associated with a corresponding change in your glucose. So it's only going to show up in your insulin concentration, not in your blood sugar concentration. And this is a key distinction. Sometimes people think, okay, I check my blood sugar and it's in the normal range. And I always want to ask those people, okay, you have normalized blood sugar, but is it normal because your insulin has gone higher to keep it normal, or is it normal along with normal levels of insulin? And people don't know the answer to that because you can't test your insulin levels at home like you can your blood glucose. And so it doesn't impact your glucose, but it could be impacting your insulin. Boric acid inhibits CA2 release in response to a bunch of fancy schmancy receptors that are in the body. But the point is, it does impact the very receptors that would then impact your insulin. Animal studies revealed that boron affects triglyceride levels as well and may act as a metabolic regulator in enzymatic systems. So again, when we look at things like triglycerides, which is on your standard lipid panel, you think it's impacted by your carbohydrates, and it is primarily by carbohydrate consumption. And typically when you have higher levels of triglyceride, it's typically because you're eating too many carbs. But I've had many people over the years tell me, hey, I've got my carbs at 20 grams and yet my triglycerides are still 147. What's going on? Maybe it's boron deficiency. So do you see why this is so important, that it's so much more than just looking at specific macronutrients in your diet? You have to pay attention to the micro as well. However, a study confirmed that the maternal status of boron in normal and diabetic pregnancies is not correlated with the lipids and boron levels. The serum lipids and boron levels in 15 non-gestational diabetic and 19 gestational diabetic women showed no significant change in boron. All right, so let's skip boron because that's getting boring. See what I did there? And let's go to the next one. Sorry, can't resist. Calcium is the next one. And most people know about calcium, and generally they think, okay, this means I need to take a calcium supplement, or this means I need to drink more milk, but not necessarily. And even before I read this, let me caution you. Please, please, please don't, unless you're significantly deficient in it, don't supplement with calcium. Because the body has a funny way of taking excess calcium. If you already are sufficient in calcium, it takes excess calcium and it deposits it in places that you don't want it to be deposited, vis-a-vis your coronary arteries. So think about when you get your coronary arteries kind of checked in a heart scan, like I talked about in a recent Jimmy Rants. What is it looking for? It's looking for calcified plaque. Well, where does it get the calcium to make it calcified plaque, which is very hard plaque? It gets it from excess amounts of calcium in your diet. So you don't want too much, you don't want too little, you want the Goldilocks amount of calcium. And if you eat a ketogenic diet, you can include dairy, you're getting quite a bit of calcium there. You don't really need to supplement extra calcium. Calcium homeostasis plays roles in insulin resistance and secretion. It's impaired in diabetes and contributes to defective cell regulation in erythrocytes, cardiac muscles, platelets, and skeletal muscles. The impaired homeostasis is concerning as it could be a significant contributory factor in the proper regulation of insulin secretion and action, also affecting various vascular complications independently. So this is an important one that we need to pay attention to. And listen to the connection to vitamin D. In 2007, a study showed that changes in calcium and vitamin D levels appeared to be involved in the development of type 2 diabetes. The study showed a moderately consistent association between low levels of vitamin D and calcium and dairy intake, and thus a prevalence of type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. So the moral of that story is don't let your vitamin D go too low because it tells where calcium should go in the body. So when you have adequate vitamin D is like, all right, calcium, come here. Go over there, go over there, go over there. If there's not enough vitamin D in the body, then it's basically a free-for-all, and this calcium goes willy-nilly all over your body in places it's not supposed to. The serum vitamin D levels and the prevalence of metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes were analyzed, showing inverse associations with the incidence of type 2 diabetes or metabolic syndrome for the highest versus the lowest vitamin D and calcium intake. So did you catch that? Low vitamin D, low calcium equals a propensity for developing type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. Thus, they said the inverse of it, higher vitamin D and higher calcium in the blood leads to less risk of type 2 diabetes. This is big, guys. Like, we want to focus on carbohydrate and make it the be-all, end-all when it comes to diabetes and insulin resistance. But we're learning here today in this paper, these micronutrients play a lot more profound impact on your health than you probably even realized. Hyperglycemia, which is high blood sugar, produced an adverse influence with vitamin C and calcium, whereas supplementation with these nutrients showed a beneficial effect on the metabolism of glucose. Two small group studies, a contrast in the levels of serum calcium was reported. One study with 30 subjects in Baghdad reported an increase in the amount of serum calcium with a substantial decrease in parathyroid levels. Another study from India reported significantly decreased levels of serum calcium in diabetic patients compared with the non-diabetic. Increased blood levels of glucose were negatively correlated with serum calcium levels. On and on and on. They go through all these different studies looking at having adequate levels of calcium, keeping diabetes risk low to nil, and then inadequate and deficiencies in calcium, leading to the greater propensity and eventually turning into insulin resistance and then type 2 diabetes. Strong connection there, you guys. The next one, cobalt. Have you ever heard of cobalt? Most people have not. A number of studies have reported that the typical blood levels of cobalt are less than 0.5 Ug per liter. It showed that cobalt chloride decreased gluconeogenesis in diabetic rats through its glucose lowering effect. So when you are deficient in cobalt, you're not getting all the effects of your ketogenic diet that you thought you were. Cobalt alone or along with ascorbate reduces lipid peroxidation in visceral organs of diabetic rats. That's just fancy schmancy. It messes with fat metabolism. Blood levels of cobalt declined in type 2 diabetes compared to non-diabetic counterparts, and cobalt treatment showed amelioration of nephropathy as well as heart function in a rat model of type 2 diabetes by alleviating the oxidative stress. So get this, someone with type 2 diabetes headed for nephropathy, they're able to ward it off because the cobalt improves the heart function, alleviating the oxidative stress, which think of oxidative stress as kind of rusting up inside the body, and so things slowly are decaying, and so cobalt kind of prevents that. And again, how many people are paying attention to all of this in their own diet when they're eating food and when they're supplementing? You're probably not. You're just eating food. And those of us that eat real food, we're kind of getting this without thinking about it. But I think about all those people that survive and subsist on junk food and processed foods. They have stripped every bit of these micronutrients out of those foods, and thus they're way, way deficient. The studies performed on human subjects to assess the levels of cobalt in diabetic patients are inadequate. One study in Pakistan targeted diabetic and non-diabetic men in 5 different age groups. They reported a higher mean concentration of cobalt in the diabetic patients, which is contradictory to previous studies. Another study reported significantly higher serum concentrations of a lot of these micronutrients, including cobalt, lower levels of cobalt in diabetic patients. It's a bit inconsistent when they look at the human studies, but in the animal models, they're showing there is a relationship with cobalt. Next one, chromium, and you might have heard of this one before because chromium is used for those people that have insulin resistance, that have a little higher levels of blood glucose. Chromium is a mineral that can help to lower levels of blood glucose very naturally. Since the discovery of chromium as an essential trace metal in 1955, it has been found to effectively improve glucose tolerance by reducing your insulin resistance. A China-based study showed that supplementing with chromium improved blood glucose, insulin, cholesterol, and A1C levels in those with type 2 diabetes in a dose-dependent manner. In other words, dependent on how much they were deficient in it, that they supplemented with it. Proper chromium nutrition improves blood lipid profile and insulin action. Most diets cannot fulfill the suggested intake of 50 milligrams for chromium. Inadequate chromium leads to signs and symptoms similar to diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So do you see how it's intricately involved in the development of insulin resistance? All of these micronutrients, guys, if this has never been on your radar screen before, I hope this is scaring the bejeebies out of you today. Oh my gosh, like I do have difficulty, even on a ketogenic diet, trying to control my blood sugar and control my insulin levels, and I can't understand. I'm eating keto. It should have resolved by now, and now you're seeing there's another wrinkle to the story in all this, and it's these minerals and trace elements. They're so critical. Chromium improves glucose insulin levels in subjects with hypoglycemia, hyperglycemia, diabetes, and high cholesterol with no detectable effects on the control subjects. Chromium also improves insulin binding, receptor number, and insulin receptor enzymes by increasing insulin sensitivity, beta cell sensitivity, which is what the pancreas spits out insulin with, and insulin internalization. All right, so they go into a variety of the studies looking at chromium, but I've talked quite a bit about chromium in the past. Definitely look into that if you have blood sugar issues. Most people are going to find benefit if they start supplementing with chromium. Next one is another big one, especially those of you that have thyroid issues. Listen up. Iodine. Iodine deficiency leads to decreased thyroid hormone synthesis, which in turn leads to increased thyroid stimulating hormone, so TSH on your thyroid panel, secretion, and increased thyroid gland growth. A recent study showed that excess of iodine diminished cell viability and compromised the function of insulin secretion that could be mediated through endoplasmic reticulum stress and by inducing those pro-apoptotic, I can't say that word, apoptotic proteins. Reading these studies sometimes is a little bit harrowing because they throw fancy schmancy words when they could translate. I try to translate for you guys, but it's a little bit hard on the spot sometimes. Thyroid function is essential for regulating your energy metabolism, and abnormal thyroid function may have substantial effects on your blood glucose. So ask anyone who has a thyroid issue how they're able to manage their blood sugar and their insulin levels, and they will probably tell you it's pretty hard. And it's pretty hard to get adequate levels of energy, tired a lot. Patients with diabetes are at an increased risk of thyroid disease. A study was conducted to assess the clinical implication of iodine status and the levels of urinary iodine in type 2 diabetes patients. In one cohort study, they were randomly selected into various groups. Subjects were evaluated for fasting glucose and lipid profile, as well as all the serum concentrations of TSH, T3, T4, creatinine, and iodine in the urine. The study revealed lower urine iodine concentrations in people with type 2 diabetes compared with the healthy control. Insulin resistance is a causative agent of the pathogenesis of impaired glucose metabolism. It's associated with increased thyroid volume and nodule prevalence in patients with metabolic syndrome. So they go on again through all of the various statistics and studies looking at the thyroid health specifically of iodine. Thyroid disorders are more common in women. Did you know 30% was the total? 30% thyroid disorders in women. A retrospective chart review of an American Indian population had shown an association between diabetes and hypothyroidism. A total of 156 cases of diabetes, 25 cases of hypothyroidism were identified. In the women with hypothyroidism and diabetes, it was more prevalent than men, 5% versus 21%. Hypothyroidism was more prevalent in women 60 and older, 21%, compared to younger women, 5%, suggesting that American Indian women have a high prevalence of a coexistence of not just thyroid, hypothyroidism, but also diabetes. So iodine's a biggie. This next one is a biggie as well. Iron. Now, there is one thing I'm going to say about iron before I read this. Iron is a double-edged sword. Some people have very, very low levels of iron, which can lead to what they call iron deficient anemia. And it generally hits women. And think about it, with your cycle, you're losing blood and thus you lose iron. And so that could be one of the causal effects of why women have lower iron levels. And then there's the flip side of it that's also bad. Everybody talks about low iron, but high iron is also a problem. I've tended to have high iron for a good bit of my life. And I have come to the conclusion that the way to get rid of that extra iron, besides not eating iron-based foods as much or cooking in a cast iron skillet, and most certainly not supplementing with iron, is to give blood on a periodic basis. So I do that about 3 to 4 times a year. Okay, iron. It affects your glucose metabolism. The bidirectional association between glucose homeostasis and iron metabolism is being increasingly acknowledged. Impaired iron uptake could be a contributing factor that could be affecting your glucose metabolism. Serum ferritin concentration in type 2 diabetes patients may affect their insulin sensitivity, vascular resistance, viscosity, and the oxidative damage. Both blood ferritin levels and BMI can act as independent predictors in a glucose tolerance test. So in one study, they performed what's called an oral glucose tolerance test. It's called an OGTT. So this is where you come into the lab fasted, and then they give you this glucose tablet, which is usually about 70 or so grams of glucose, which is all carbohydrate. And then they start testing your blood sugar over a period of time. Usually it's at 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 120, sometimes just a 2-hour postprandial. Other times they push it as far as 5 hours postprandial just to see what happens to your glucose over that time and how it responds to that glucose tablet. So they did this in pregnant women with anemia or with diabetes, type 2 diabetes before 20 weeks of gestation. They were tested again at 28 weeks to measure their serum iron, ferritin, and transferrin. The records were evaluated after delivery. Out of the 401 women, 97 of them were diagnosed with gestational diabetes. And they were compared with a control group from the at-risk non-diabetic. The results revealed no change in weight, BMI, or hemoglobin levels in the third trimester, but they showed significantly higher concentrations of blood ferritin, iron, transferrin saturation, and postnatal hemoglobin, suggesting that there was a correlation between having an increased level of iron stores and glucose intolerance. So huge, you guys, huge. The increased risk of anemia in diabetic patients was studied in a survey where 820 subjects with diabetes were examined in a long-term follow-up. A number of tests, including blood tests, urine tests, and a full blood count, were performed on these patients over a period of 2 years. Almost 23% of the patients had unrecognized anemia, which was 2 to 3 times higher than in those patients with renal impairment. The increased risk for anemia in patients with diabetes could be a consequence of not just iron deficiency, but also other micronutrients. In this cross-sectional study, plasma iron indices were assessed, which showed increased transferrin saturation in diabetic patients that was 3 to 4-fold higher compared with non-diabetic. This study also demonstrated increased transferrin saturation levels are associated with low C-reactive protein and elevated fasting glucose, which was much more frequent in male patients. So the main thing is iron is a key element that, again, I think is missed when it comes to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. All right, let's skip to the next one. I hope you're enjoying this. This is really good information. The next one's magnesium. And we've heard about magnesium deficiency for many years. I've had many people on the Livin' La Vida Low Carb show over the years talk about magnesium deficiency, but magnesium is a cofactor required for the movement of glucose into the cell and for carbohydrate metabolism. So I hope you hear this one loud and clear. You're eating keto and you don't have enough magnesium in your diet, either through supplementation or your food, your body can't move the glucose into the cell. And you can't properly metabolize the carbohydrates that you do eat. So magnesium is critical. You need to be checking if you're deficient, and the vast majority of people are deficient. It is involved in the cellular activity of insulin itself. I can't underscore this one enough. If you're still struggling with blood glucose and insulin levels all out of whack, even though you eat keto, it could be a deficiency in magnesium. Low magnesium intake is a risk factor for diabetes. Deficiencies in magnesium will inhibit cellular defenses against oxidative damage. Remember, that's the rusting in the body, which in turn results in a decreased resilience to the oxidative stress that's caused by diabetes, thereby expediting the progression of all the complications due to diabetes, including amputations down the road. Not good. Therefore, a deficiency in magnesium may exacerbate type 2 diabetes, but studies have also shown magnesium intake reduces the risk of type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome because it alleviates insulin resistance. So if you're one of those people that struggles with insulin resistance, and you haven't checked your magnesium levels, can you get them checked? And if you see that you're sufficient, great. Keep doing all the things you're doing. But if you see that you're deficient, you need to be supplementing. You need to be making sure that you're getting adequate amounts. Animal studies have shown that dietary magnesium administration, 50 milligrams per milliliter in drinking water for 6 weeks, can decrease blood glucose levels, improve your mitochondrial function, and reduce oxidative stress in mice that have diabetes. A number of studies have shown that low magnesium levels is a common attribute of diabetes. It occurs at an incident of 13.5% to 47.7% amongst those studies looking at patients with type 2 diabetes. And then they go through all these different studies. Magnesium is a cofactor for the downstream actions of the insulin cascade. Decreased intracellular magnesium damages tyrosine kinase activity, and it blocks insulin action within the cell, resulting in growing insulin tolerance. I can't underscore it enough, guys. Please know your level of deficiency in magnesium, and most of you will be deficient. All right. Next one, selenium. Selenium is a micronutrient that is essential for the synthesis of selenoproteins to carry out various biological functions. It is recognized for its antioxidant and cytoprotective properties, and supplementing with selenium is considered to be preventative due to its counteractive oxidative properties for the onset of metabolic disease, such as type 2 diabetes. In one cross-sectional analysis of U.S. adults, blood levels of selenium was measured by atomic absorption spectroscopy in a diabetic population with a fasting plasma glucose of 126, diabetics with insulin treatment, and a control group. After they adjusted for age, sex, race, and BMI, the mean difference in selenium between diabetics and control was 2.1 nanograms per milliliter. The study concluded that higher levels of selenium is positively correlated with the prevalence of diabetes. However, no recommendation is provided about supplementation or restriction for people with diabetes. So they look at the various research. I will tell you, selenium is an easy one to get, especially if you're keto. So if you eat keto and you're like, how in the world do I know how to get selenium into my diet? I encourage you to go buy some Brazil nuts. So if you can't find them in stores, they're very hard to find in stores. Find them online. Go on Amazon, go wherever you buy nuts, and look up selenium or look up Brazil nuts, and then just eat 1 to 2 Brazil nuts a day. Now make sure if you get the Brazil nuts, don't leave them out on the counter. They have very healthy fats inside of them that can go rancid if you leave them out. And usually when you buy Brazil nuts, you have to kind of get a bigger bag of it. So just keep it in your refrigerator, and when you wake up in the morning, grab you 1 or 2 of those, pop them in your mouth, and you got all the selenium you need for the day. And as with all of these, just look up your favorite foods. Just type them into a Google search and put food, whatever the micronutrient is, and then put food. It'll show you the whole list of foods that these can be found in. And then I think this is the last one. Nope, there's a few more. Zinc is the next one. Zinc is an essential micronutrient for metabolism that requires more than 100 enzymes for protein folding, gene expression, as well as the production and neuralization of ROS. Reactive oxygen species is what ROS stands for. Zinc plays an important role in cell signaling, cellular processes such as division and apoptosis, as well as disturbances in zinc homeostasis associated with diabetes and insulin resistance. There it is again. It reduces cytokine production, and its deficiency may cause impairment of various things in your immune system. Zinc partially functions as an antioxidant, and zinc supplementation results in a reduction of ROS production, which is beneficial in aging as well as in diabetes. It's vital for the appropriate processing, storage, secretion, and action of insulin in the pancreas. And zinc deficiency augments the damage in the autoimmune attack, resulting in the destruction of the cell, which turns into type 1 diabetes. So getting adequate zinc, guys, is so critical. It might contribute towards diabetes progression through genetic polymorphisms in the zinc transporter 8 gene. And diabetes, insulin, and zinc have a complex correlation. Diabetes affects zinc homeostasis. It's also responsible for an increased urinary loss and decrease in total body zinc. So once you have type 2 diabetes, you're noticing in most of these that I'm reading about, most of these, it sucks these out of the body. And so you want to make sure you're getting adequate amounts of these to replenish. I will tell you one role of zinc they did not put in here because they're primarily looking at insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. But one important role of zinc is stomach acid production. So 90% of people are deficient in stomach acid. Everybody thinks, oh, I've got too much stomach acid because you get heartburn and all that stuff. But no. When you get heartburn and all that, that has nothing to do with having too much stomach acid. 90% of people don't have enough stomach acid. And zinc, the reason why they're deficient in zinc. Okay, so what are the conclusions? Diabetes can alter the concentration of trace elements, which may further lead to changes in the nutritional status of an individual. Although some micronutrients are known to be involved in the pathogenesis and progression of type 2 diabetes, others may only be a consequence of depleted or altered carbohydrate intolerance and insulin resistance. The studies often report contradictory results. The blood or tissue contents of certain elements like copper, manganese, iron, and selenium may be higher in diabetic patients than non-diabetic. Although the majority of diabetic patients do not have micronutrient deficiencies, zinc, chromium, and magnesium deficiencies have been identified as a subgroup in those patients. More cohort studies are necessary to identify the micronutrient deficiencies in people with type 2 diabetes. This review demonstrates that trace element deficiencies, either directly or indirectly, are associated with increasing oxidative stress, which then leads to insulin resistance and diabetes. So pretty good study, right? And if you joined us late, this study was called Role of Minerals and Trace Elements in Diabetes and Insulin Resistance. It's published in the June 17th, 2020 issue of the journal called Nutrients. But did you know all this? I think we put a lot of focus on macronutrients and specifically carbohydrates when we talk about things like insulin resistance and diabetes, but we don't really talk about micronutrients. And why? Why are we ignoring micronutrients in it? I'm going to argue because the powers that be that educate about diabetes and insulin resistance, they only want you to focus on diet. They only want you to focus on the macronutrients. Because the moment you start looking at micronutrients is the moment you see how some of their advice is flawed. And the moment you start thinking about micronutrients, it means you're starting to pay more attention to the foods you eat that could be included in your diet that would have those, that don't fit the model of what they want you to be eating. So you're starting to see a little bit of the failure of the dietary recommendations. We'll think about like the 2020 dietary recommendations. That's not about diabetes, but think about that. How much of that has anything to do with micronutrition? I would dare say none of it is. It's all about the macros. It's all about the what, but it's not all about the why. And the why is getting these adequate micronutrients so you ward off some of these diseases, specifically insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. All right, I'm interested in what you guys have to say, so come on in. We're going to come over here to Instagram first, then over to Facebook, finally over to YouTube. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. My doctor said magnesium inositol helps bring glucose down. What do you think? Yeah, I think getting magnesium, I don't know about the inositol part, but getting a form of magnesium, magnesium glycinate, magnesium oxide, Just be careful with magnesium citrate. It can be a little bit problematic unless you're having constipation. Then take magnesium citrate. But yeah, I think that's a great way to try to normalize your blood glucose levels for the reasons why that we shared in this study that I shared here today. Chromium kills your starch and sugar cravings. It really does, Kat, especially starches like potatoes, rice, and bread. That's good to know. And yeah, I've been a big fan of chromium for many years. In fact, I have a supplement with my company, Keto Living, ketoliving.com. I have a supplement called Berberine Plus, and it's berberine, which is another one of these supplements that can help lower and modulate blood sugar, along with chromium and this thing called Metabolic. So a nice symbiosis of controlling those cravings, like you were saying. Grandma Does Keto, Dr. Atkins' Vita Nutrient Solution, and the book you did about micronutrients both really helped pinpoint these ideas for me. So yeah, again, Real Food Keto, we go into great detail all about micronutrition and how it relates to all the parts of your metabolism. So definitely check that book out if you have not already. Thank you, Instagram. I'm going to pop over here now to my Facebook page. See what you guys have to say. What's up, guys? What's up, Facebook? All right, let's see what you got here for me. Is there a cheat sheet for all this awesome information, Paula? So Paula, you can go look up this study. It is ready for you to go Google and look up role of minerals and trace elements in diabetes and insulin resistance. And it's published in the journal Nutrients. And it was published June the 17th, 2020. So go look this up online. You can just Google it. That's the thing. People are always like, give me the link when I post this on YouTube. And I'm like, I gave you all the ways to go look it up. Now Google it. So unfortunately, when I do a live, it's impossible for me to give you a link here. So just Google it. Yeah, trust me, if it's something that you can go find on your own, try to find it on your own if you can. But I hope that helps you out, Paula. All of that information that I read from is in the study. It's all an open access article. Berkeley says, I wonder if there's a good supplement that provides these micronutrients. Well, that's the problem, Berkeley. These aren't an across the board, everybody needs to be taking a certain amount. Some people are going to be more deficient in these things than others. And what if you're deficient in magnesium, but you're not deficient in boron? You don't want to take a supplement that would have all of them in there. So you really need to customize it based on your own results. So first and foremost, go get your mineral levels checked. I recently sent in a hair sample, and yes, I don't have much hair to sample, but one of my followers said, hey, I do hair mineral analysis. It would be my pleasure to do that for you. And so he's running that for me. And once I get those results back, then I'll see if I'm deficient in anything, and I can shore up some of these things. And so that's more what you need to do, is figure out what you want to have done. It's not necessarily blood work. You can have it done, your hair analysis. Just talk to your doctor or talk to a functional medicine practitioner. They do these tests all the time. You could go to your doctor and say, hey, I want to get an analysis of what my minerals look like in my body. Family doctor may go, what? So you might have to go see, like I said, a functional medicine doctor who does this all the time. Or a functional medicine practitioner. They don't run blood tests, but they could definitely try to figure out where you're deficient in various areas. Tracy said, this is so much information, my head is spinning. Yes, sorry about that, Tracy. When I'm reading from these studies, it's a little hard for me in real time to not read it and then try to translate it. So sometimes I get a little bit lost in the weeds of some of the gobbledygook that they use, but that gobbledygook is important. It's just sometimes lay people don't always follow along quite that well. But thank you, Facebook. Let me pop over here to YouTube. Got a few more minutes left before we got to get out of here. Johanna says, hello, hello. Michael says, greetings. Craig says, been taking a pinch of boron in my water daily. Sounds weird to be recommending supplementing with laundry detergent. No, not borax. No, don't use borax. Juliana, what do you think about magnesium and isotal? Yeah, somebody just asked about that over there. Um, my doctor said it was good for people with insulin resistance. I was diagnosed with PCOS. Yeah, if you have insulin resistance, getting boron and magnesium and all these things I talked about is so important. And she specifically magnesium and isotal. Yeah, I don't know why that one would be the holy grail. Magnesium oxide and magnesium um, borax is boron, says Craig. Yes, I'm aware. Um, uh, I don't know why they would be recommending that one. Magnesium oxide, magnesium glycinate, and again, if you have constipation, magnesium citrate. But I mean, that version sounds as good as any. I'm not an expert in magnesium, so I don't know what the anisotol would have that would be different than the other ones that I listed. But if they say to take it, it's probably a good idea. So, but good news on the front of diabetes and insulin resistance, right? I don't think enough people are talking about micronutrients and how they can impact your glucose metabolism, how they impact all sorts of things in your metabolism, and directly impacting insulin and directly touching on your pancreas, which and your carbohydrate metabolism. All these things are so important, and I hope this Jimmy Rants here today giving you a lot of these micronutrients really helped you out. And if you've got a friend or a loved one that's got insulin resistance or diabetes, or you yourself deal with this, hopefully this helps you out. And I would love to hear if you started supplementing with something you found you were deficient in and you finally found the results you were looking for. Let me know. That's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. And as always, you can engage live in the content. You got to go follow me right here on Instagram. I'm at Living Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, engage live. I'm here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And yeah, we just do all kinds of fun ones all week long. So thank you for being here today, Instagram. We also simulcast over here on my Facebook page. So thank you guys for being here. Also over there to my YouTubers. Thanks for watching the live stream and everywhere watching this on Jimmy Rants. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay right here on Instagram. All you have to do is go to IGTV. As soon as this is over, I will be writing a few show notes and then we'll have it right up on my page so you can watch it on replay on IGTV. We also throw all the past episodes up over on YouTube. Type in a keyword, Jimmy Rants, you will find the show, or youtube.com/livinglowcarbman. Then finally, hop on over to the official website for this show. It's jimmyrants.com. You can see all the past episodes there. And it's a way that you can support me. If you like what we do here and you like hearing me talk about these studies you don't really hear about anywhere else, definitely click on the Patreon link. And a donation of any amount would be greatly appreciated. And I'm helping you guys out to help me out by giving you early access to my podcasts for the next week. So those will be going up within the next couple of days for next week's shows. You can watch those long before anybody else. You can also see, I'm going to start putting up some exclusive Jimmy Rants content. I'm going to come into Jimmy Rants Studio and record specific ones just for my Patreons. And so you get that exclusive video of me doing a rant that's not public. And then you get input on how I do this show and lots of other things. I got a lot of things planned for that. So definitely go support me on the Patreon. Click on the link at jimmyrants.com. That's it for now, you guys. I'll be back again tomorrow for Ask Me Anything. So get your questions ready. I know you got a bunch of them. I saw a couple come in today on this show. Bring your anything question for me tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Be there, be square, and we'll see you then. All right. So yeah, good show today. Thank you for that. I think I saw a couple of comments come in over here. Thank you for sharing good information. You are the best. Thank you, Juliana. I appreciate it. I try to find things that you're not really hearing a lot about out in the mainstream, or if you are hearing about it in the mainstream, I try to give you a different angle. That's kind of what I try to do here, and I try to keep the content encouraging because there's enough discouragement out there right now to kill a horse. So not about discouragement. All right, let me pop off of here for now. Thanks for watching today, guys. We'll see you again soon. Bye, YouTube.